Welcome, Alex. I am so excited, not only because we have the same name but spelled different, but because we get to talk about your incredible journey. I have to be so excited because we wanted to do this conversation in May, which was like now, whatever, 4 months ago. And so I'm actually very
Yeah.
excited to have it now because of how much probably you've experienced in the last 9 months versus only
Mhm.
5 months into your consulting journey if we had done this in
Yeah,
May. Yeah. So welcome. I'm so
absolutely.
excited to
Thank
hear.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So I heard an interesting quote a couple of months ago about saying yes and how even in this really small moment, when we say yes to something, it can alter the change of the direction of where we're going. And so,
Mhm.
kind of in this series of interviews, I've been asking people, what decision did you make that led to where you're at in your journey right now? And it could be a big or a small decision.
Well, I love that quote because I think it speaks to the reality for many of us that the yes that we feel might not necessarily always be resounding enough to let it guide completely. There has to be a lot of trust involved in your own intuition to heed the yes. And the yes is not always glaring or obvious. So, I mean, the biggest thing I can point to was the decision I made almost 2 years ago to commit to this journey of working for myself, of like saying yes to basically saying yes to me.
Yeah.
Um, and from that realization, which was quiet at first and got louder and louder, it has allowed me to be brave enough to make the bigger decisions to be where I am now.
I love that. And you're a very intuitive person, right? You practice listening to your gut.
Yeah, it's a practice for sure.
Mhm. Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. Okay. So before we jump into why did you want to write grants, what was this calling to work for yourself? Why were you feeling this need to say yes to yourself?
Yeah, it was a long journey for me, and it remains a journey to value myself enough to go against what I have felt has been less of a choice in my life, ingrained in a sense of going to school and doing the next, thing that society sort of expects, which is to get a job, to work for someone else. So I did that for a long time. I worked for organizations, I was a music major in college actually, but I got my master's in communications with like a nonprofit management focus.
Mhm.
And so my whole career has been in the nonprofit world. And um, I realized probably 5 years into that journey that I was always coming up against similar challenges with my bosses
Mm,
while having very different bosses. So I was like, okay, if I'm like putting so much onto my bosses, I wonder if there's something going on here for me and like authority or,
mhm.
um, feeling like I'm in this kind of like rigid, expected box of being and like, being part of an organization, you would have to show up on time and just kind of fit this mold that they wanted me to fit versus being my own mold. And so I was like coming up against that over and over and over again. And that was when I like finally with many years of that experience coupled with my own like yoga practice, my own spiritual practice on the side where I was able to start to learn how to listen to myself. I started to realize like, there are other ways of being in the world professionally that don't necessarily mean I have to work for someone else. Especially in the nonprofit world, right? It can be super tricky because you believe so clearly in the mission and the vision, that I think sometimes we can lose our own sense of like what we really want because we're so aligned with the mission, but other things aren't necessarily happening to really make us feel like whole and fulfilled.
And that's the problem with overworking, right? I think often nonprofit, whether we're the doers in the nonprofit or the leaders, we can often get so wrapped up in the mission and vision and we start overworking. Yeah, you're recognizing a lot. Okay, so why did you want to learn grants?
It was sort of serendipitous in a sense, but also I think speaks to my strengths. So I've always been interested in writing. I've always felt like writing has come fairly easily to me. Like it's always been one of those tasks when I was working for a variety of nonprofits that I didn't mind, writing the blogs or doing some of the communications pieces. And probably there was something in me when I moved across the country to California to be with my now husband, who's from California. And when I was leaving behind the work on the East Coast, which was development and communications work, but pretty broad development and communications work, not super niche.
Yeah.
I think that was probably, I remember actually like kind of knowing that grant writing is what I wanted to start to look for work wise, or more focused writing work, because I knew over the years that the writing is really what I gravitated towards.
Yeah.
And I think I knew in my heart and mind somewhere that like that could transfer to working from anywhere, working, being kind of a more autonomous worker, which I really enjoy. And so I saw when I moved out to California a post for a full-time grant writer at this education nonprofit in San Francisco. And I took it, and kind of the rest was history. I like got really hooked on the grants. I loved it. I loved the niche focus of the grant work, especially having come from wearing like 50 million hats in other organizations.
Yeah.
It was so nice to just be in like a single focus lane.
Yes. And you still get a variety of projects. So like the
Yeah.
work is the
Yeah.
same, but you get to learn so much that it feels like you're working on so many different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I loved that part of it too. Yay. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so cool. And very serendipitous that you're like, okay, I need to make this change. I'm going to actively move to California to usher some change into my life. And then boom, the
Yeah,
job was there for you.
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool. So in January, right, you took the leap to write grants full time, consulting, right? You left
Mhm.
your
Yep.
nonprofit. So was the nonprofit that you left the education nonprofit?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, I was there for about 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So tell us about taking the leap. How was it to just like all of a sudden be you, be your own boss?
It has been a journey. It remains a journey. I remember in the beginning being really scared. The being afraid has kind of dissipated because it's
Nice.
been, 10 months or so, 9 or 10 months. Um, but it was I think I want to keep reiterating like these decisions that I made, while from the outside seem really bold and brave, and they totally are.
Yeah.
It took me many years to even start to think about like taking this leap. Um, and so even with leaving my the organization I was working for, the last one I worked for, it was at least a year-long process of coming to terms with it, of talking to my colleagues, of talking to my bosses, of figuring out like how to wind down my work. Um, Maybe even longer than a year. And I was lucky to be in an organization that valued me enough where I felt safe enough to have those conversations, where I knew like my job would remain. Um, so it was definitely a process, but I just kind of remember thinking like, if I don't do it now, there will always be an excuse to stay. Um, and taking the leap is like never comfortable until you land. You don't know how it's going to go, but I knew that like staying was feeling worse than stepping into the unknown.
Yep. Yep. It's
Yeah.
often that pivot point that you eventually then have to tip, right? Have
Yeah.
to tip into the unknown.
Yeah.
It is a privilege to be able to discuss this transition and to feel safe enough at work to talk to your coworkers and your boss about it. Was there anything that, like, was it just the relationship that you all had built? How did you feel safe in doing that? Or was it scary at one point to talk to your supervisor or to another coworker about these dreams?
Yeah, it was scary. I think I have been doing a lot of really intentional work on myself alongside like the work in organizations. So I'm a very big proponent of therapy. I go to therapy every other week. I was going weekly at the time that I made the transition, and have like a lot of friends and supporters that like I talk to about these moves, and I get the courage through them. I get the courage through my yoga practice.
Mm.
So it's borrowing the conviction of other people in my life when I lack it myself can be so helpful. Like borrowing the strength from the teacher, which we talk about in yoga all the time, that if you don't necessarily know how it's going to turn out, but you know there's something calling you, you don't have to necessarily make that leap alone. You can lean on the people or the practices in your life that ground you and remind you that like it is safe, it is okay. And so that was really helpful, because certainly when I walked in and had the conversation, I got the nerves, but it didn't override my conviction, I guess. And like it didn't drown out the noise of the people that and the practices that were surrounding me in those moments that felt just bigger than this one decision.
Yeah.
And I also recognized, the worst that could happen. I mean, for me, I just felt like if it doesn't work out, if I leave and this whole thing doesn't pan out, I can always go back to an organization. I know how to do that.
Absolutely.
So it didn't feel, once I realized that it, like, what was keeping me at the organization wasn't even monetary, or it was like something deeper, which was like being afraid to value myself. That was something I wanted to challenge.
Yes.
And I really wanted help to challenge that.
Yeah. So what kind of help did you seek to challenge that? You talked about therapy and yoga practice. Anything else?
Yeah, those are the big ones. I think also just processing a lot with friends and family before, needing to make the leap.
Yeah.
And like sort of practicing those conversations. I also remember I had a conversation with not my immediate boss, but another kind of more senior member of the development team that I was working for. And once I told her and she handled it so well, I
Yeah.
felt much more confident in talking to my boss. Um, and I did that with a couple of other colleagues as well, but she was more senior. And so there was something like kind of brave about that for me before going to my boss, and getting her encouragement was huge.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so cool. Yeah, I think, we talk about bravery a lot in the collective, obviously, right? Lots of people are making really brave choices, but I think you're right in the bravery does come from in these smaller moments, right? It comes when you're surrounded by
Yeah.
your support. And it might have been that first conversation with that senior leader that then tipped all of these other dominoes and made you feel safe in a variety of different circumstances. It's just yeah, again, it's so amazing to me that these small little moments that feel big,
Mhm.
sometimes they feel big in the moment, but sometimes they don't, right? It could be like a
Yeah.
water cooler
Yeah.
conversation with someone
Yeah.
that leads you then to being able to spend 5 weeks on the East Coast working remotely and spending time with family and friends or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so neat. Okay, so what has been the hardest part about branching out on your own?
The hardest part about branching out on my own, I think, has just been the instability of the work.
Mm.
Um, I have a pretty solid client load, but it ebbs and flows.
Ah,
And some weeks I'm working 10 hours, some weeks I'm working 50. It's sort of this a little bit feast or famine right now.
yeah.
And I do really enjoy my structure and routines with work, because I also love to not be working.
Yeah.
So growing a business, or even just being on your own, like it can feel sometimes like I have to work when the work comes in, but then that can sometimes feel like just, oh my gosh, there's so much on my plate.
Yeah.
um so I would love to get to a place where I feel like I have steady, maybe 20-25 hours a week of grants, or whatever it is for me. Setting appropriate, hourly rates will help with that. um so that I don't kind of wake up in the morning and feel bogged down with all of the to-dos, or the
Or
worry about
scared that
what
there
does it
aren't
mean if
enough
I
to
don't
do.
have work.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just
Um,
letting it settle, letting it settle.
yeah. Meredith, will talk about that journey as well often. And then she ended up getting this partnership where she got a year-long contract. And so it was guaranteed income for the whole year that was still flexible, right? She was still a consultant. And then you were able to like plan out the year. And so I think, as
Yeah.
as you continue to build your network and build your experience, right, those opportunities will come too, where you can search out those RFPs and really become, have a stable, at least some stable clients.
Yeah.
What has been the most rewarding part of branching out on your own?
Helping clients who have a variety of missions that I'm really excited about and passionate about has been so rewarding.
Yeah.
I work with organizations across the board, like, environmental activists and Soto Zen Buddhists and food justice warriors and all of these different kind of realms of work that is so relevant and exciting to me. I feel lucky and rewarded by getting to plug in and to see these leaders really like believing so passionately in what it is they're doing, and for me to play a supportive role in that. And especially when they get the grant, I mean, there's nothing cooler than that. And I've had some really amazing experiences of really, impactful grant funding for clients. There's one client in particular who their organizational revenue was $300,000, and we worked to get a $400,000 grant for them, and they got it. And no one was more surprised than me, but like it was awesome. I mean, it changed the trajectory of their work for the next. It was a 3-year grant, and so it was really, really transformative. And it also just validated this path for me to see that come through. And you get a lot of losses as well as the wins, for sure. I've had my share of like people not getting grants that they really hoped they would get, but it's super rewarding when the hard work pays off too.
Oh, absolutely. So this like organization had a pretty small operating budget. Can I ask you if they were willing to pay for your services and how you handled that conversation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I never work, I never will take a piece of the grant money. As we all kind of know, that's generally like not recommended or best practice at all. So I always set up with clients beforehand what my fees are. I'm getting way more comfortable just owning my worth, even with organizations that have smaller operating budgets. This client in particular, she and I have been working together for a little more than 2 years, because I should mention I was doing some freelance grant writing at night, on nights and weekends when I was working full time. And I was charging her a little less than I wanted to be. So when I went out on my own in 2021, this year, I sent her an email and just said, I'm upping my rates as I go out on my own, and here's my new fee. Let me know if you have any, questions. And she was on board. So, and certainly, it's affirming when they get the grants, because you realize, while it may feel like a big number to be charging somebody, when they get a grant, I mean, almost of any size, that return on investment in their eyes is huge.
It's huge. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's been really affirming as well. And like, I still keep wanting to actually up my rates as I'm getting more success for clients and seeing that it's okay to own that number and to say, this is what I'm charging. And that, I think, comes with just trusting your own worth as a grant writer too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a conversation that's really interesting to me is like, I think you're worth $1 million an hour, right? Like your worth is indescribable, right? Your worth as a human cannot be put into a number. But recognizing that your work does have value, and like the amount of energy and expertise and brain power and brilliance that everyone brings to their skill is worth a number in today's world, right? That's how we quantify things. And so to make sure that that number is aligned with your values and your work is is like a forever journey, and something that I'm really proud of all of our unicorns for doing, because it's hard to do. Yeah.
It is. I think, like, as women too, it can be really challenging. And there is something that happens for me when I know that I'm charging appropriately, my work matches that, and I rise to the occasion of that number in a sense too. When I'm undercharging, I'm just not as, unless I'm, specifically working with a client that's like I'm charging them for a very specific reason less than I normally would. But yeah, it's just been really interesting to see as I'm charging more, and I'm doing a lot more project-based work too, like charging for a project.
Nice. Yeah.
The more you do it, the easier it feels, and like the more empowering it becomes.
Yay. Oh, that makes
Yeah.
me so happy to hear. Yay.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Okay. So what is your proudest accomplishment thus far in your grant writing journey?
My proudest accomplishment is I worked with a client they're still a client actually. They're a for-profit company and they had never gotten grant funding before for this really cool project that they're working on. And they decided to apply for an EPA, Environmental Protection Agency federal grant. It was a huge lift. We didn't have a lot of time to do it. And it was my first like major grant project, like kind of on my own. This was when I was still working full time, but they were kind of a client on the side. And I remember in that experience feeling less than equipped to be their leader on this project, but I did it anyway. And whether they got the grant or not is kind of inconsequential. They did get the grant, but it was more like, oh my gosh, how much I learned from stepping into this leadership role, learning with them, like working really, really, really hard on a project. And feeling like so competent by the end of that project, not because like I have the brains. I mean, but it was more just like the commitment I made and the dedication and the time and the energy that I took to like really just be completely immersed in this particular project and to push myself outside of my comfort zone to do it. And I learned from that experience how much I loved working on a major project like that, to sink my teeth into something, to learn new vocabulary. I'm not an engineer, I'm not in that world. But it really pushed me and it made me feel like smarter and sharper when it was over. It was really cool.
That is really cool. So are you gonna go after another one? Have you worked
Yeah,
on?
so we went for a second round grant and they got it. So they're in the middle of that second grant and I'm helping them manage that grant right now.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yay. Okay, that's an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah.
So what are some key takeaways from learning with us or being a member of the collective?
I've learned so much from the collective. I use so much that I've learned has helped me just scaffold out my business. So I utilize so many of the tools that you all have put together, like constantly. The funding strategy is huge. I'm in a funding strategy right now with a new client. And I feel like I've just had everything I've needed at my fingertips when I've gone out on my own. And I should say that also made me brave enough to go out on my own, was like being part of this collective, which goes to what I was saying before, is like, you don't have to be brave by yourself. And so I've watched a lot of the videos. I haven't watched all of them, but I just kind of like take what I need at the time and implement. And so, yeah, the funding strategy has been huge. Being part of the collective and just kind of like seeing what other people are struggling with has been huge. I'm working very closely with another unicorn right now. We're like kind of switching up subcontracting for each other. And so when I have too much work, I'll kind of give her some and vice versa. So that's, there's like this kind of team member that I already have. And just knowing that you all are out there encouraging us is just so great. It's been such a gift.
Oh, thank you. That makes me so happy. There's literally like nothing that like swells my heart up more than just all the unicorns pairing off and working together, right? And like building these
Yeah.
teams that just are making a huge difference in this world, and you're helping each other charge correctly, right? It brings so much more power to the powerful work that you are already doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. It's awesome.
Ah, yay. Okay. So rapid fire questions. What's one
Yeah.
word to describe your dream lifestyle?
Simple.
I love that. Next vacation spot.
Ooh. Greece.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction.
What are you reading right now?
Oh my gosh. Right now I'm reading Nonviolent Communication, which is Marshall Rosenberg's book for my yoga. I'm in yoga therapy training as well. So that's kind of one of our assigned readings right now. So it's not fiction, but it's very interesting. It's very thought provoking.
Yeah, I'm sure. And probably pretty heavy in aspects.
It's really intense. It's bringing up a lot for me and thinking about like being a white woman and like white dominant culture as well. I'm really glad I'm reading it, and it's bringing up a lot that I want to be addressing. That's challenging too.
Yes. Ah,
Yeah.
very cool. And then last TV show you binged?
Oh, Jane the Virgin.
And
Okay.
what's your superpower?
Listening. I think I'm a really good listener, and then I can kind of take what I've heard and make the world better from it somehow.
And I think you are proving that you're doing that. One grant at a time, one client at a time. It's pretty incredible.
Thank
Oh,
you.
well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your journey and your story with us. I think you're immensely brave, and I love this concept that we are braver together and that we go into these decisions borrowing that strength from others. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Thank you
all
so
your
much. This has been so fun.
agreed. All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Alex. Bye.
Bye.